Okay, I'm standing right now in Lachish, and we're going to be in Lachish a number of times. And it's a fascinating, fascinating place. It's really, really cool. In fact, even a continuation of this very video. But I will say that Lachish doesn't really have anything to do with our perek right now in theory. But something found here might help us be able to envision a point that's mentioned in Melachim that perek Yud. So here we go. In the gatehouse in Lachish, we find something really surprising and perplexing that we don't fully understand at first glance. There's this area that's closed off inside the chambered gates. Now, we've discussed gates in the past. We discussed the gate houses and how you can have a big area between the inner and outer gatehouses. And then the inner gatehouses itself sometimes would have a ceiling over it, but either way, sometimes you'd have different chambers. For example, here we have the six-chambered gate. And inside these chambers, inside these little rooms inside the gatehouse, that's apparently where you'd have people like the judges or even sometimes the king would be sitting, or the elders of the city, and they can adjudicate, or you'd have scribes and you can do different transactions that needed more authority behind them. So again, they wouldn't actually be sitting in the gates, but this is the gatehouse, and you'd have these different, almost like offices, or in the gates in themselves. Here, they found something very strange inside one of them, and the truth is, part of it they find it isn't so surprising once you understand how things work here. They found a wall which was closing off an area in the back of one of these chambers, meaning there was a part of the chamber that had been used for something else, and at some point in history, closed off during the history of the Tanakh, I'd say, around the times that we're learning about. Back to that in a moment. But inside that area that was closed off is what's really surprising, and that is they found a mizbeach. Even this we can kind of understand once we understand a little bit about what things are going on. Now, is this a mizbeach of avodah zarah, or is it a mizbeach as a bama? We're going to talk about the difference between avodah zarah and bama later on in another video. But for our purposes right now, I'm going to leave it as we don't know for sure. Again, discuss that more at another time. Either way, it was not allowed. It was usher. That is clear. And so it would seem perhaps that this wall was built to close it off because it was usher. There was a time when we were actually doing these things even though they were usher. That shouldn't be a surprise to us because if the Navi keeps saying stop doing it, that means that we were doing it, right? So this actually corroborates that. But why would we have a mizbeach like this there? Well, the truth is, it's kind of like tefillah derech. Meaning today, whenever we're going out on the path in an area and we need a little extra protection on those paths, so we say tefillah derech. They didn't have that. So what do? They have to go all the way to Yerushalayim to be able to bring a korban to hopefully be able to be safe on whatever travels they're doing. The most natural thing to them was to bring a korban right before they leave the city on whatever dangerous or relatively dangerous journey that they're going on, and perhaps they'd even bring like a korban todah on their way back because we should say thank you after Hashem did protect us after we asked for it beforehand. Either way, perhaps that was why it's not the only place where we end up finding a mizbeach in the gates. Let's say even that we can kind of understand, even though it's not allowed, it was usher, at least we can kind of understand them. But here's where it gets a little strange. They found this stone on top of the mizbeach with a hole in it, and apparently this was a toilet. Now, it was a symbolic toilet because it was never actually used. We found other toilets that had been used, and yes, that's part of an archaeologist's job, not always pleasant, is to check if these things have been used and to be able to try to figure out what they can from that. Either way, for another story for another time. But here they found that it had never actually been used, and it was more symbolically, it was placed on top of this mizbeach right before it was sealed off. Chances are this was done in a huge ceremony for the entire nation to see, and we're going to talk about who actually does that kind of things. But here's the thing. This could be a glimpse through a window in time back into ancient times of these very psukim. This could be the kind of thing that's being discussed right here. Now, again, not in this area because we're in Yehuda and that was in Israel, right? But when Yehuda comes and he's attacking and he turns the Beis Habal into motzaot, that in essence means bathroom. Now, it could be that they were actually used or not. Either way, this could be the kind of thing that he's talking about. We find this right here. So again, it could be that we're talking about a little bit later in Malchut Yehuda. We'll talk about what kings actually did this kind of thing in a later video when we get to learning about those Melachim. But in the meantime, this is an amazing opportunity that's unique to our generation to be able to learn directly from the land and to bring our Torah learning to life, to try to envision and connect to what was going on here. Pretty crazy right here in Lachish.